Want help to grow your business? Download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Outsource for Success. My name is Christy Smith, and today I'm going to be talking about how to manage the legal and financial risks when outsourcing. Now, I speak to a lot of business owners, and most business owners, when they first start out on their outsourcing journey, they're very fearful. They're very worried about the risks of outsourcing some of their sensitive data. And I get that. And I understand that those things can play on you, and so you don't go there. You decide that it's better not to outsource the work. But I want to talk to you today around what those fears really mean and how we can actually mitigate those fears and manage the risk around them to help you achieve that outsourcing goal that you have. So I believe that you can manage your risk in outsourcing in 4 different ways. And the first way is around hiring due diligence. And this is probably one of the key areas because this is where you start. This is where you're finding the right person that you can put the trust in to actually outsource your work to. And I have a bit of an example around this. When I first started outsourcing, I was a little bit worried about the financial side of the business and giving away my IP as well, because I didn't understand the process of where you find that trust in the first place. So understanding that, for example, if you have a sensitive database that you want somebody to be working on, you wouldn't actually go to a freelance site, for example, give them full access to your database without first understanding whether they're trustworthy. And I think that's not just with any outsourced resources, it's with any resources within your business. So you want to make sure first that you've got the trust in that person, and there's a number of ways you can do that when you're hiring. One of the first ways you can do that is actually getting referral base. So asking people around you, have you used a virtual assistant or have you used a specific resource before that you already have trust in? And the minute that somebody that you know already has trust in that person, then usually that barrier breaks down and it's really easy for you then to have trust and faith in that person yourself. So that would be the first way. The second way is if you are going to a freelance site, then you need to do your due diligence around the hiring process. So actually going in and getting the reference checks done, speaking to their prior employees, speaking to people that have worked with them before and will vouch for their credibility and for the security of the information that that person worked on in their business. So understanding that, if you're still really unsure about it, maybe then you need to think about going to an organisation or an agency who is already hiring people through their business and mitigates that risk themselves. So understanding things like making sure that the person actually has firewalls on their computer to protect your information, making sure that you're not giving them, in point 2, the limited, giving them full access, you're giving them limited access. And I think this is a really important point. I know in my business, I use Google Drive, and a lot of the Google documents in that drive, I don't want everybody in my team having full access to. So I'll shift those into a separate folder and only give the access to the people that really need it and whom I trust to actually look after that information. Later today, we're also going to talk to Trudy Yip from Numeric Bookkeeping, and she's going to share her experiences around this. But Trudy and I both agree that it's all about how you treat the people that are coming in and actually having that flat global mentality and mindset that it's not an outsourced resource necessarily, it's someone who you're bringing into your team and into the fold of your business. So trust comes with the way that you treat people and what responsibility that you're going to give them. So limiting the access is a good one. There's a good app called LastPass, LastPass. That's a great resource for actually limiting what your team can actually see as far as passwords go. So I highly recommend that if you are using a number of different contractors for work, that you give them access to what you need via LastPass. They can still access the documents or the files, but they can't actually understand what your passwords are. So the minute you need to finish working with them, you can pull them out and lock them out of that access. Point number 3 is around non-critical work. And, managing risk around this, I think, is really important, particularly in the first stages of running your business. So you could be going to the freelance site, you could be going to an agency. Either way, when you're first giving them a task to do, don't give them something that is highly critical to the success of your business, or if they fail at it, will have a massive impact on your business. Give them some non-critical work so that they can slowly move into the role. They can understand what your expectations are of them, and there's no pressure. Yeah, because I think a lot of the time if we put pressure on our staff when they first start in the business, then it doesn't help them succeed. So don't give them that initial pressure straight away. And point number 4, finally, is testing and measuring. So this is really important. It's really easy to give people the right tools, to give them the right support in the beginning, but if you're not constantly testing and measuring their performance based on what you've given them, then how do you know that it's working? I would say the same as this as far as the risk management side of things goes. If you're, not sure about whether they're actually using the data the right way, if they're accessing the data the right way, then you need to test and measure that. So if that's a fear that you have, you need to go in and make sure that it's not being taken advantage of, and there's ways that you can do that. So there's your 4 steps to risk management. It's really important that you go through those. The hiring side of it is probably the most important, because once you get through that, you can then move into what's really important, and that's your legals and financials around the person that you've brought into the business. So the legal side of the business, and please, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know, the legalities of who you might be hiring next into your business, so I do advise that you speak to somebody who has experience in that field. But in my experience, running my business and running an offshore business primarily, here are some of the things that I would consider. Your structure of engagement is really important. So when you're bringing somebody on board, have a think about what that structure looks like. Are they a part-time employee? Are they a casual employee? What do you need to think about, from a legal perspective in bringing them on board? Are they a contractor so that, you don't actually need to pay them workers' compensation and all of the legalities around hiring somebody, but you might need to do something else? I'd also look at, particularly if you're sourcing staff from the Philippines, look at what their particular business model is in the Philippines. Do they get paid something like the 13th month, which Trudy is going to cover later in the session, because we're firm believers of incentivising our staff. Those incentives and those rewards need to be put into the engagement documents. So thinking about what needs to go into those. So what is the structure of the role that you're bringing in, and what does that engagement look like? What do they need to understand? And getting some legal advice around that is going to be very helpful. Contracts as well, make sure that you don't bring anybody on board without a contract. There are exceptions to this rule, and those exceptions will be your project-based work that you're getting somebody to do on a flat rate, quick project fee. But if you're looking to hire and engage somebody for the long term, and they're going to be an integral part of your business, then you need to set up a contract that tells them what their responsibilities are, and then also what your responsibilities will be to them. So make sure that you've got a contract that is legal and binding. When you are hiring contractors from offshore, then you need to get some advice around how that can be legal and binding for you. One thing that I really love is the non-disclosure and, the making sure that there's confidentiality agreements. A lot of my clients in particular require this from us. So we then pass that on to our outsourced resources to make sure that they're aware of what is required. Now, there's probably a little bit of a note here to say that with international law, that's not going to stand up in a court of law if they do break that. And there will be ways to actually get around that. But again, you'll need to get the right advice. But I would say this, that in all of the contracts that we particularly do for our business, we put that in there because the contractor then has some guidelines to go by. They know what's expected of them. They understand the repercussions if they do break that trust and if they do something outside of what that agreement is. So I think it's very important that you have that written in the agreement for them. The last thing really is to think about your tax considerations, and this is where you're probably going to need to talk to your accountant or your bookkeeper around when you're bringing somebody on board for the long term, whether they're an employee, talking about how that structure works from a tax perspective. So make sure that you do get advice around that, because you don't want that to come back and bite you if you've done the wrong thing 5 years later. So there's your legals, your structure of engagement, contracts, putting in a non-disclosure or confidentiality agreement, and your tax considerations. So there's some of the key things that I'd be looking at when you're considering outsourcing from a legal point of view. Moving on, we can talk about the financial side of things. And the first part really is around your budget and cash flow. And this is the first thing that you should be doing when you are considering taking the work, outsourcing the work. The first thing really is, can you afford to do it? And the second thing is, what can you afford to do? So you might need to actually talk to your accountant or your bookkeeper on this and talk to them around, this is the role that I need, this is what I really would like to have in the business. What financially do I need to be bringing in to be able to afford to do that from a cash flow perspective? Yeah? So make sure that you've covered all of that and that there's going to be enough money in cash flow to actually warrant paying somebody on a weekly or fortnightly or monthly basis. And understanding that will then, knowing what that figure is, will then give you and mitigate the risk of you hiring someone who's, too expensive, or, you might be able to hire someone who has more skill level because you've got more money to pay. So that's your first activity. What should you pay? Now, this is a really big question, and it's also quite a contentious question, because there is a range of, particularly when you're outsourcing offshore, there could be a range of between $2 and, here locally, $70, $80, $90, $100 that you're paying somebody to do that outsourced work for you. So I don't think you can generalize that. I think you need to be asking the questions around your peers and around other business owners as to what they're paying and what is, the going rate for the type of skills that you're looking at. You're also going to put in there your ethical beliefs as well. I certainly, and I know a lot of people, will never pay $2 an hour for a virtual assistant in the Philippines. And, you need to consider that, whereas there are lots of businesses that have no problem in doing that. And, that's perfectly fine if that's what their beliefs are and they're happy to go and do that. And, understanding what you should pay. So I would say, as a general rule, you're going to be looking at anywhere, sort of up to $10 an hour for some basic admin tasks on freelance sites. Or going direct to a virtual assistant in the Philippines, for example. You might be looking at, the graphic designs or the creative arts. You'd be looking at anywhere from, $10 through to $30 an hour on those freelance sites. And then you're sort of looking at your local girls and contractors being anywhere from $25 all the way through to $120 an hour, depending on their skill level. And I really believe that if you're looking for someone just to do rote tasks for you that are quite process driven and very simple, then it's a great idea to look at that offshore, because it is going to be more cost effective for you for your business, and you're going to get better.
To continue enjoying this presentation, download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.